All right, welcome to Shop Night Live here in Canterbury, New Hampshire. I want to talk tonight about design and some ideas. Actually, I have another project in mind, and I also want to get your input to see what you think of it. I also want to take you on a little shop tour to see a wall, like one wall of the shop that focuses on bedposts. And this wall has been the background of a lot of fun little photos we've done. But this wall is really special to me because it really connects me to my time with Pugmore in North Carolina. Back then, when I started with him in 1990, traditional furniture was much bigger. It seems like it's dropped off a little bit in popularity, but actually down there, it's still strong. You had a lot of influence in that region, like the mid-Atlantic states, for colonial furniture, like 18th century furniture is huge. And I don't know if it's the influence of Williamsburg, Virginia being so close by, but really nice pieces in homes. There was a lot of good antiques still, and people were collecting those. And Pug would take those in and make great copies of the best pieces, notes and patterns, and then sell them through his antique shop, right? That was like the first little shop as you drove in his driveway. Sort of like I got here, but a different scene altogether. It's a Sonic Burger now, by the way. But you go a little further down the driveway, and there was the shop where I spent 3 years working with him. But he, down in the shop, they would make all the reproductions. So people would come in, and there was one wall up. You'd have to go through the main shop and then up this hallway sort of to the finishing room. And along the wall were all these bedposts. Well, not all of them, because a number of them I made myself, but a lot of them, actually twice as many. So you're probably wondering how I ended up getting them. Well, Pug, in his late 70s, he got macular degeneration, and he had to stop working, unfortunately. So in closing down the shop and cleaning it out, one day he gave me a call and said, "Hey, I wonder if you'd come up here and help me with these bedposts." And he also invited another guy who was friends with the shop. He didn't ever work in the shop, but he was friends with Pug, and he was interested in furniture making too. He had a regular job, but he was a serious hobbyist, like a lot of you, right? So he invited us over, and he said, "I wanted you guys to come over today because I wanted you to take these bedposts if you would like them." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll have them." And so we decided it would be best just to take turns and select from the big stack on the wall and just pick out whatever post we want. A lot of them were close to duplicates, so you could, it wasn't like I was worrying about not getting one. There were some that meant more to me because I had made them there in the shop and copied them, and there was some really heavily carved ones. But anyway, we started the choice, and I actually gave Bill, was the other guy. I said, "Bill, why don't you go first?" And I kind of knew what he was going to pick because it was a beautiful carved post. It was reeded and had great carvings around it. And but I didn't care because the first post I wanted, you probably wouldn't even guess. If you look at all of these posts, my first choice that day out of those probably 40 or 50 posts was this one right here. Look at that. You might say, "Hey, what's with that one?" Now, this is the pattern, obviously. And most of these ended up being pattern posts because they had some issue or defect that couldn't be salvaged. Look at that, still rough sawn on that side. But they would turn the pattern and then have it as a model. And then people would come over and decide what they wanted. So he would take a piece of masking tape and stick it on the post and then write, Mrs. Goddard or whatever, wants it in a queen size walnut, little heavier. And that was it. It would be like, that would be it on the post. And so these streaks are the gum from the tape. This is like probably 40 or 50 years old, some of this tape. I mean, this one still says Mrs. Rennick up here in Raleigh. Look how brown that tape is. And then sometimes, then he would get to also put on these little cards. This is a woman in Goldsboro. Make this bed standard double. 6185 was that order. So that was 5 years before I got with him. So I just left on as many of those as I could that were from him. So anyway, I was just noticing today, I'd never noticed it before, that there's a lot of tape on this post, but that's not why I picked it. I don't know why. There must have been a lot of orders for that. But this, I'll take it down. What I love about it is that it's very kind of refined in the way that the turnings are so clean and slender here. It just has a very nicely refined shape. And I thought, and it also is a lower post, it's meant to have a canopy, to come up. And so I was thinking this would be a sweet bed to make, for my daughter someday now, or my grandchildren, if I ever have them, but maybe for your grandchildren. So I want to show you a photo of why I think this bed is so special. It's called The Fine Points of Furniture. And there's some really nice examples in here. And he describes the differences between the good and the great beds of history. And so we've got, these are more like primitive low post beds. And then you've got the taller post here. And this one's finished out, amazing carving on that, called the Masterpiece. And this one's got reeds on it. And then here you can see this style has a canopy. Now, or a teaster frame, we would call it. And this one's got a nice bow. So this is low enough where it could have that kind of height on the teaster frame. It would rise up as it go across. It would be so sweet, like kind of like a storybook bed to have in a little girl's room, But the turnings on these are so nicely refined. If you look how thin the necks are of these pieces, I just love that. And I felt like this bed captured the symmetry and beauty of a really nice, refined, masterpiece style bed. You never know it looking at the tape, but that was what I went with. So let me see if I can hook this back on. But you see up there, we've got all kinds of posts. We've got low post beds. So those are usually about 48, 54 inches high. And then you start getting into those mid-range. This is another one that would lend itself for a canopy. This one as well. So they're kind of like middle range. And then we get into the tall post beds. The pencil post, we were all familiar with that. It's got an octagonal shape. And at the top, it's about 1 1/8 inch, 1 1/4. And then it keeps growing till it gets down to the square at 2 5/8. So it's this long, tapered 4 sides, and then the corners are chamfered. So not exactly like we did last Tuesday night, if you were here, when we made that. We made a straight stretcher octagonal. You can use that method on this because you've got to have the chamfer has to actually grow as it gets heavier, the post gets heavier. So if you look at this post, what's really nice about it is all the chamfers, all the facets are the same approximate width around this point, and then around this point, and around this point up here. So someday I'll show you how I do that. It's a nice little trick using some tapering jigs and the joiner. So it's fun. But this one's got a nice little scoop here. You could finish your pencil post with the scoop or the classic lamb's tongue. And this is actually carved by hand. So once I run down with the scoop, you can see this one's got the little profile drawn. So there's a sequence of cuts that I make to shape that. But this is one of my favorites. I love the proportions of this. There's all kinds of pencil post bed styles out there. But then over here, a much simpler carving. I mean, that would be fun to make. That wouldn't be hard. And then we've got here, we have the flutes. This is a fluted post. So the flutes are hollow coves, and the reeds are the beads, like that. Okay? So I'm going to set this aside for a second, and I want to show you this book that influenced a lot of these posts that Pug would reference. And this is from the Furniture Treasury by Wallace Nutting. I think the first two are in a single volume, and then the third is in its own. But it's really great. If you like 18th century furniture, it's a great history, and also he has wonderful illustrations showing finials. He did an amazing job with this book. This is a really nice reference if you want to build 18th century furniture. I mean, he goes into all the descriptions of the different types of feet, so you learn a lot of terms through here as well. Yeah, so you've got the bracket feet, and ball and claw feet, and he describes the different regions where all were made. So that's a nice section there. And then there's a whole section on poster beds, like tall post beds. This was a classic reference, I'm sure, for Pug, because I recognize some of these posts from his collection. This looks like that reed and carve section of that post we were just looking at. And this is a very classical shape over here, like a vase shape here. This is more an urn shape, and we thought of this more as a vase. And then more, this is a simpler post. This one's up here, I'm almost certain. Yeah, check it out. I turned this one back a while ago using his pattern. But if you look at this second post from the right, there it is. Except, yeah, it's all there. So it's got a very similar shape, a little taper to the bottom, and then we just carved these little lines in there, or grooves. Those are just hand carved. You can kind of tell they're by hand. You got a nice vase shape here. And this is a solid piece of mahogany all the way up. I don't think I pieced this. That's one example directly from Wallace. So this leaf carving is very similar to the one we just showed over here. See that carving on that post detail? Just got those leaves. Very simple, actually, to carve that. It's straight. You just turn the urn shape and then mark it out and carve away. This was a really nice post that we used to do. You can see this is just a smaller version of these. And we always called this the bellflower bed because of that bellflower shape right there. Made quite a few of these, actually. This post I turned here, these came from Pug, I believe. The low post beds, I was messing around and I designed this one. This is out of pecan wood, hard pecan. I got from Mr. Rhodes, Doc, down in Wilson, North Carolina. If you're watching, Doc, I still got it. I never made any beds out of that pecan, but it made a great pattern material. So some of these are called cannonball beds. This one right here, He used to call that the acorn bed. That was a really popular one too, because this fatter shape right here, he would carve just in a little grid pattern. This is from Pug. This is one of those acorn beds with a little just linear carving. So the horizontal cuts were just made on the lathe, and the other vertical cuts were made by hand. So it's just like a big acorn on the top. That's a nice low post bed. I love how hardy they are, and they have these deep bulbous turnings. If you could feel the weight of them, it is just an honest bedpost. You know, that is going to last forever. And then this one, I turned a lot of these too. We called this, what do you think we called this one?
Football.
That's right. That's right. We called it the football post. So you can see that this is a newer one, but check this one out. This is what it was patterned after, and that is at least 200 years old. Look at it, how it's so old and worn, and that was a very simple kind of primitive bed that we patterned this one after. This one's in mahogany and finished. All right, so let's get to the point. I've been thinking about designing a new bed, and possibly for our next course, or not the very next, but maybe in a couple. And I've been thinking about something that was very simple, but shaker style. Now, this is a post I turned 20-something years ago when we moved up here. I thought I should do a shaker style. So it was at least 20 years ago. And it's very simple, straight turning. And I often thought I'd come to it. And I only made one bed like this. I always thought it was a little too light, but decided to refine it a little. So come on over to the bench and I'll show you what I came up with. I just want to show you in the Shaker Furniture book. It's really hard to see the bed, but a lot of shaker beds are very plain, like this. You know, you just have this double rail, and this has these rollers on it, so they could roll it quickly away from the wall, sweep the floor, and push it right back. They were really into efficiency and cleanliness. So very spare, just a very austere kind of shape, no glamour there. And there's another one here against the wall and very kind of plain. So I didn't want to go total dead plain. I did see a number of them over at Canterbury Shaker Village. I wanted to incorporate more of the shape that we had here. So we had a cap, but there was a certain style that Pug had. He used to make some low posts, and they had a really nice shaped cap on them. And this is what I ended up with. This is going to be the low post. Check that out. This is just wimpier compared to this one. So this is going to be the head post. It gets a long mortise in there, and then the headboard slides right into that mortise. This is a foot post, so it's meant to be low and right at the height of the mattress. Let me show you one of the head posts. So here's the head post that goes with this foot post. That's sweet. What I love about it is just the way these came out. It feels like an old kind of flattened, doorknob almost, but it's really comfortable in your hand, and it's got so much more substance. It's 2 3/4. So this would be turned from a 12-quarter cherry. This is all cherry. You could make it with whatever you want. And this one, look how different. These are both the head posts. You can see how much more substantial it is up here. And the block down here is just nicer. And this lamb's tongue detail is interesting because unlike the hand-carved ones on the pencil post, this can be cut as you're turning. And that's how I did it. I turned it on the lathe. So it's a sweet detail, going from the round to the square. The lamb's tongue was a classic transition element. So you just have like this beautiful falling out and meeting the square again, rather than having a hard edge or hard corner there. And I guess it looks like a lamb's tongue. I've never actually seen a lamb's tongue, but there you go. And then the bottom has a nice sweet little cove here. And I actually picked up this detail from my visit to the Shaker Village. This is a classic way that they transition on table legs in Canterbury. So you have a little fillet like that, which is that little flat, and then a cove, and then down into the lower turn of the leg. So you can see how it's a little beefier. This one always started to look like a candle pin to me. So I'm glad to make it a little heavier like that. All right, so let's see if we can just, I'm not going to put the whole bed together, but I do have the headboard, and I want you to get to see with it in there. So being a low post bed like this, it's 40 inches high. 40 inches high, and the mattress height is usually close to the lamb's tongue here. It's usually a little higher than the bottom of the headboard, because I don't like to see the bottom of the headboard. So I think I finished this one at 27 or 28. Yeah, 27 I think. It's going to end up being the mattress height on this one. So on a typical tall post bed, all 4 posts, all the rails you can disassemble completely, so that you'd have and on the post you have a hole here for a bed bolt of a nice traditional one, and the bed bolt comes through and goes right into the tenon of the rail, and then finds the nut that's embedded in the rail, so when you lock it in, it pulls it really tight. So a traditional poster bed is like a post and beam construction. You have these big chunkin' mortises with tenons on the rails that are only about a half an inch long. You don't need a long tenon. As long as it's pulled in tight and on the ridge here, it's super strong. And it's great construction. Tall post beds need to be able to disassemble completely, because you can imagine trying to move it up a flight of stairs. It would be really difficult. Too much. You got a 7.5 foot post, even if it was just the end section. So those come apart completely. It's very easy to move and put upstairs. This bed is a single bed size. So I wanted to make it a lot like you might see a shaker bed. It would be an excellent child's bed or grandchild's bed, or it would be sweet in a guest room. So really nice quality bed. But the size of it doesn't require you to have it disassemble at the head. It's low enough that you could have this in one piece and move it easily upstairs, downstairs, whatever. The single twin mattress is 39 inches wide. So this bed overall is going to be a little over 40 by 40. So it's easy to move. So what we do is, in this case, the headboard or the head rail will be glued in. That'll be glued in, and the foot rail will be glued. And only the long rails will be bed bolted on this. So you will be able to take it apart and move the long rails. So let me just assemble the headboard section. And I got little numbers on there, like Roman numerals. All right, so this goes here. Yeah, that's good. And then I'll put in the headboard. So I got this nice little shape, little round over the top. Fits right in that groove, and that actually, I don't glue that in. I mean, I suppose you could put a little glue at the bottom, but you want to let it move, because that's going to want to expand and contract. So there's a little gap at the top to allow for expansion, but it fits in there nicely. And then let me get the other rail, and I think I'll just drop this on from the top here. There we go. All right. So we can stand it up and take a look. I could see this was exposed to the light. Oh, that's not great. Look at, I've got, I thought I had this covered well, but you see how it's a little darker right there? It got exposed to the light. But I could just sand that a little heavier and that'll come away. And then once you finish it, everything will darken together. But don't you like that? I mean, that's pretty sweet. I love the way this looks with the headboard in there. Then you have this nice kind of cove cut in the bed, in the headboard, and then a little flat in that classic cap on the post coming over. Really nice stout rails. The footboard has this much lower appearance. So the foot rail is going to come in like this. Now I did take a picture of this months ago and posted it on my Instagram, assembled. But here's how the lower footboard is going to be. Sweet, huh? Isn't that nice though, the way it has like a, when this is assembled, it's really stout. But I really am pleased with this detail. The lamb's tongue coming into a short round section, and then the cove with a little fillet and a great flattened kind of ball on top. You just feel how that would be warm, and just, I wish you could, it's just a perfect size post, I think, for this bed. It's got a little more beef to it than that other thin post. And here's the way the side rails would be configured. I'm going to use slats on this. This is a rail that is actually finished a little. It's got some finish on it, one coat. But the inside, I'm just going to put this, this is ash here. You can see these little cutouts. They're actually just made by gluing these pieces on top, and then slats will go across, ash slats. So it'll make it so you'll just have to buy the mattress. You don't need to buy the box spring too. And plus, by doing that, you end up getting a lower profile, because mattresses are so thick these days that if you had the box spring and the mattress itself, you're up to, usually these days it's about 20 inches thick. So that's a lot of height to put on a classical. I mean, that would be from there to here. But if you just get a nice full, mattresses these days are about 13 or so, or 12. So sitting on the support, we're going to be right up here with a nice full mattress, and that's all you have to do. So you put the slats in, and then you lay a thin piece of like plywood down to create a nice solid footing for, and then you put a good quality mattress on there, and you have an awesome guest room bed or a child's bed with that classic shaker, little upscale though from your typical austere shaker.
George is saying he likes the slat support approach. Is that the approach you always use for slats on beds?
No, it's not. Good question. A lot of times I'll use bed irons. I don't know if I have any right here, maybe. Where I get a lot of my hardware is from Horton Brasses, if you check them out. Horton Brasses in Connecticut. We'll put a link to them in the notes, but that's where I get the bed bolt hardware. And you'd also see what they call bed irons, and they're just a heavy piece of angle steel, 1/4 inch thick, and you can get them at different heights, and they come out like a good 3 inches to support. They're meant for having a box spring. So the box spring is supported by those little brackets on the sides. But with this being a low profile, it's not going to be a box spring bed. On a lot of those poster beds, we would have, there's enough height there, we've designed them in. A lot of the squares on the bed are longer, and a lot of the mattresses, the finished height is 30 inches high. That was typical for a traditional bed. So you can see if you had a 20-inch thick mattress with box spring, it's going to be about 10 inches off the floor. So we would make the rails be probably about 10 inches. You could go a little higher and then sling the bed iron a little low, like drop it a little lower than the rail. But 30 inches high, it's a good height for a bed. It's a little high maybe if you're vertically challenged, but I think you'd enjoy it. Then you can get to build the bed steps. But so this is a really traditional approach. What do you guys think? Do you like that style? Do you think it would be a good project? It's going to require turning, so it's going to be a turning kind of course too. It'd be fun to show the different ways of using gouges and skew chisels to do the turned elements. And I would practice. I even practiced with these. I wanted to work out the elements and get the ball right, so I have these sample pieces where I was working it out, the shape that I liked, and so I just had chunks. And it's really fun to turn and practice with that. But this would not be a bad project. It's a little, you definitely want to practice on turning the lamb's tongue because you're turning into a square, and that cap on the ball, that would take a little as well. But it's not a bad piece to turn, and because it's not really long, you can turn it, I think, on a standard lathe. It's 40 inches, so you need a little extra. So like I have a little extra here that gets cut off. So yeah, I think they start out at 41 minimum, probably 42. You need 42 between centers of your lathe, which a lot of them are. Well, thank you for hanging out. I know we didn't build anything tonight, but we were kind of dreaming and designing and looking back at the past and trying to draw from the best of tradition to incorporate into a modern traditional piece. If you like these videos, consider subscribing. That's my new softer way of saying it. Consider. And like and share. And that helps us out, so I appreciate that. See you next time on Shop Night Live.
Take care, everybody.